that roar when you ran out just puts goosebumps on the back of your neck.
Walsh went straight through. Andrews there.
He's just forever looking for an opportunity.
Exhilarating football.
That's a good sign of a good team.
Accelerates and punches through them.
And he's only going to get better.
And the hammer stands them up. And Queensland going to do it again.
Well, thanks for joining us on this week's edition of Queenslander, joined by Darren Lock here. I'm Adam Jackson. The King's back after his week-long stint down in Sydney there. Well, how do the people of New South Wales treat you these days, post-retirement? Are they nicer to you now than they were back in the 80s and that?
I like talking to the young people there. They're not old enough to remember me. But as for the older ones, there has been a little bit of discussion about the old times, the old days, and No, they don't treat me any better, but I enjoy every bit of that.
Nice. And the big game this week, match of the round in the NRL, is actually down in Sydney, Bluebet Stadium. You'll see live and free on Channel 9 Thursday night, Locky, the grand final rematch, Broncos-Panthers. How important for the Broncos to make a good showing of themselves after the way the grand final ended?
Yeah, I don't think they'd be thinking too much about last year's grand final. Like we're talking about 2 points up for grabs. That's completely different to winning a grand final. And, it's a big test. Down at Penrith, they had a confidence-boosting win last week, the Panthers. No Adam Reynolds. So I think the priority for the Broncos would be just to play well. I think they were, last week against the Rabbits, they had a good win, but there was a lot of drop ball, a lot of errors made. So I think it's just probably executing a bit better and play to the best of their ability. If they do that, I think they'll be happy with that. Whether that's enough to win, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I agree with Locky, and particularly the venue. If they were playing at Suncorp, I think there'd be plenty of people extremely excited and really quite confident that the Broncos would be displaying their best. Playing at Penrith is extremely difficult, but in a funny sort of a way, I guess that's going to inspire Kevy to have his troops at their level best, and it'll be quite interesting. These two. Certainly will be carrying some memories of the grand final into the match, but there is one priority here, and that's just that they produce their best. And even if the Broncos should be beaten, if they play to the best, I'm sure that Kevy will go home a little bit sadder, but still quite comfortable with their performance.
Do you think, Locky, there's still any lingering psychological damage for the Broncos, given the fashion in which that decider finished?
Look, I think when they went back to pre-season training, they would have just put it behind them. The only time it really gets brought up, I mean, I know Kevy made them watch the game when they came back. I think that was a cleansing sort of moment for them to say that we're done with that, let's move on to next year. I guess the only time it gets brought up now is obviously when the media ask questions about it. And I think for the players and the coach, they probably... It's behind them now. That's why they don't want to talk about it, because they just want to move forward. And look, the Broncos got to work hard to get themselves in a position to get to another grand final. So before they even think about, what happened last year, in my view. So I don't think there's a psychological issue there.
Kevy's actually banned them from talking about the grand final this week. We had fun with that in the media. He's told the players not to talk about the grand final.
Well, I think he's going to do well to make sure that the guys don't watch any television, don't read the papers, don't do anything. If they do, they're going to be hearing about the grand final. So I'm sure that they'll do as told. They're mature players. They know that there is the possibility of that causing some sort of hysteria in the back of their minds, but I think they're professional enough players now. They'll basically do as told and take a distinct want to win into this game, and I think we're in for a good performance from Brisbane.
And just in comparison with that, Locky and Walt, if you look back to your careers, no doubt the Broncos players would be ruining that missed opportunity to win a grand final. But if I give you one game or one moment in your career, you can replay it tomorrow and try and change it, what would it be? Well,
from a Broncos perspective, like the ones, the close games, the big games you lose at the death are always ones you never forget. For me, it was the Melbourne Storm semi-final at Suncorp. Greg Inglis scored right at the death. I remember we turned the ball over. I was out wide. I had Justin Hodges outside me. I can't remember whether it was Tony Carroll on the inside of me. And I'd sort of decided to come out of the line to try and... Because we were scrambling to get our defensive line out there a little bit because of the turnover. And I remember coming up out of the line to try and, hunt them back in towards the middle of the field. But anyway, they end up scoring. Where I went up, Hodjo didn't come up. That created a gap. So, in some capacity, like I made an error. At that particular time, we lost the game, and it was a semi-final. And I think most people that are Broncos fan would remember that game as well.
What about for you, Wal? Any moments stand out in your career that if you could have it back, a game you might have lost?
A club game?
Or club game or origin game or anything? A big game that you always think about, maybe we could have done this differently?
Yeah, well, there's a number of origin games there.
You won enough origin games to be fair.
Yeah, but it was the ones that we didn't, and we had a great opportunity to do so. Probably the one that I remember would have been Brisbane's game against Parramatta in our opening season. For me, it was sort of the ultimate challenge. I thought that was a match that I had to prove myself to play to a certain standard, and I didn't on the day, and I didn't forgive myself. Copped a spray from the Sydney media about not being as good as Brett Kenny. So that was the challenge that I had probably set forward prior to the game, but it was a match that I probably thought about it in all the wrong ways prior to kickoff. That was the reason that I was so terrible in that game. And if I had taken it the right way, and if I had listened to the coach and what Wayne was saying, there's no such thing as a one-on-one battle, as a battle with Brett. It's about playing your part in the team, which was completely correct.
Yeah, well, that's well said. Well, another speaking of halves battle, a big one on Thursday night. No Adam Reynolds. How hard is he to replace Locky? Because they've got so many superstars in the team, but still he's the most integral part. Yeah,
he gives them direction. Kicking game. There's a lot of things that he's sort of like the glue to the team.
Yep.
But I think I've been impressed with what Jock Madden has done when he's come in to fill in for Adam Reynolds. So again, it's an opportunity for him. He's up against the best halfback, if the best player in the game. So it's a big test for him. But I don't think he gets overawed by that situation. I think he'll do his job, and I think the kicking game will be really important, and that's probably a task that's it's up to him. And I reckon maybe the hookers might do a bit more kicking out of dummy half, given no Adam.
Yeah. Do you think, they can beat the Panthers without Adam Reynolds? I don't think they can.
It's a tough question to answer, that one, Adam. I think they're quite capable of doing it. Will they do it this week? Well, I'm not too sure. Reynolds, not being without him, I think that might be pretty tough for them to grab hold of that and prove everyone wrong. So it's a situation where I guess only time will tell, but when you're without your key player, the guy that is in charge of directing the play around the field, I think it might be a little bit too tough. But I very much hope that the Broncos get to prove me wrong in particular. That they are going to have one thing in their favour, and that's the intent, determination, the will to win, and they're quite capable of doing that. So, the Panthers, I guess we could also say that they're not quite at their best either.
Yeah.
They are the defending premiers and are quite capable of reproducing that form. Will it be this week? Well, only time will tell.
I think a lot of people think the Broncos can't win, so the pressure's on the opposition. They can go down there, play their game, play well, and with no real pressure on them.
Does it make it harder playing without your halfback in round 3 as opposed to, say, if this game was in round 13 and you've got all those reps together? Doesn't really matter?
Doesn't really matter. No. I think Jock plays a very similar game to Adam. Maybe not with the experience that Adam's got, but I don't think the game plan would change one bit under Jock.
Yeah, and I think game 3 of the season, if it was game 13, it'd be middle of the season. Yeah, sure, they'd certainly need the direction. Game 3, well, I guess everybody would expect that it'd be hard without your key playmaker. So certainly if there was the performance from the side that wasn't quite at its best, well, it wouldn't be such a surprise.
And Payne Haas in doubt too for this one, Lockie. How huge would that be if they lose essentially their best forward and their captain?
Well, then that starts putting pressure on your halves.
Yeah.
Because the go forward's not there. So if no Payne Haas, and I wouldn't risk Payne this time of the year either. But if there's no Payne, no Adam, well, that's 2 of your best players gone. That's a big out. But if Payne doesn't play, like I said, it just puts a lot more pressure on those halves creating something.
Yeah, and Payne loves working off the halves, working on the edge of the ruck, being able to work their way from the key halves pairing. And if we get the opportunity to see just how good a performance he can produce when he's working off them early in the season, we'd be thrilled. But I guess that's going to be just pushed to the side for the moment.
And one player who's started the season well, Walsh, the fullback for the Broncos, scored a couple of tries already. Ponga going well for the Knights, already ignited the Origin talk debate there. Well, Lockie, how do you look at that one? Because both on their day, selecting a number 1 for Queensland, that's going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, a long way to go between now and picking the first Origin team. So, yeah, I know Billy holds both of them in very high regard. So I think really it'll come down to just form going into the selection of game 1. So, we've got a bit over 2 months of footy to happen. A lot can, whether it's form or injury or, so there's a lot can happen between now and then. But at the moment, it's just good to have those 2 guys playing well.
Yeah, it's good to have the opportunity to make a decision between those 2. So that's fantastic. Ponga's probably going to be determined to produce his form gradually. Whilst he's performing well for Newcastle, certainly he wants to time that for Queensland. We've already seen Walsh in what he's able to do. There'll be a little bit of pressure on him, I guess, to keep producing his performances week in, week out. He certainly does seem to be in the right form. Is it at the right time? Well, I guess we'll have to wait till the end of the season to see that.
Can you fit both of them into the 17?
I don't think so. The game there's not too many 80-minute hookers out there anymore, and I think you've got to carry a second hooker. And if you carry a second hooker, I don't think you can carry that 14 I just think both of them are best at fullback. We did the Ponga exercise last year when he went to 5'8". Not saying he can't do it, but I just think, an out-and-out fullback sitting on the bench is probably going to put your middle under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I think you can only probably do that, I agree with Locky, if it was a utility player that could cover several positions, and I'm just not sure whether Ponga and Walsh would be able to do that. I guess they could sort of fill in the halves and cover the fullback, but to have somebody that's able to do that, and also at worst be able to fill in up front if he was all needed. So it's pretty difficult to make a decision on that. I
think Ponga actually made his Origin debut off the bench. I think Billy might have still been playing in that game, and he came on and played a little bit at the middle. So probably out of the 2, Ponga's probably a better option on the bench because he's a little bit more versatile, maybe.
Well, he's had a bit of a taste of playing up front last year. He's played wing when he was at the Cowboys. He'd have more experience as a utility, but still, it's the only way you can make it work is if Ben Hunt was to come off, Harry Grant went on, Ben Hunt then becomes a utility.
Yeah, a lot to go before we get to Origin. We always love talking about here in Queensland.
It goes to Cleary. Nathan Cleary. Oh, wow. Cleary's done it all himself. This is the greatest team of the modern era.
It was one of the greatest ever grand finals. Now The rematch we've all been waiting for.
We've got unfinished business.
Australia. It doesn't get bigger than this.
Grand final rematch. Let's go.
Blockbuster Thursday night footy on 9 and 9 now.
Another key discussion point has been the Dally M voting the first two rounds. Greg Alexander, who's a judge himself, he's called it all over the shop, the former Panthers premiership winning half. Do you like this new system? They've got two different independent judges, I guess you can call it, calling the game independently of each other with the votes?
I liken it to, I think the game's improved since we've gone back to one referee. And I feel like this is the same thing. We've gone two judges for one game.
Yeah.
Too many votes.
Yeah.
It's just too, let's simplify, keep it simple.
Yeah.
And then because what you throw into when you publish the votes is, how does one person see that and the other person see this? I don't know, it just brings up a lot of negative discussion. So it's not, they've tried it, and I thought the old system was fine.
Yeah, I thought it was working well. Obviously, it just shows that we all think differently, Locky, I guess, and there's not too many that have identical thoughts about a game in the voting. So yeah, it's a little bit strange. So will it last? I think that's probably the question. Will they continue it next year? And probably at the end of the year there'll be a bit of a discussion on was that the right thing to do? If not, let's change it.
A strange one for round one was the Hammer actually got a vote when they got flogged by the Cowboys. He got one vote for the Dolphins. I don't think his parents would have even voted for him after that performance, so that was strange. But the Hammer was sensational in round two. Speaking of the Dolphins, 38-0 over the Dragons. How impressed were you guys with that turnaround in just a week?
Well, I was very confident they'd play a hell of a lot better than they did the week before, but to go from where they were to that, I couldn't have. You never underestimate Wayne, but I could never have envisaged that was going to happen.
No, I didn't think it was going to be like that. And I know, Adam, I was down with the news and I was doing something for the tips during the week and saw the way that they had trained throughout that session, and it didn't stand out that they were ready to rip the heads off the opposition. And I think I was saying something about they seem really quiet. They're going ahead with their game plan, but it is quiet. And I thought there is cause for concern here. Well, I'm an ordinary judge. Yeah. And the way that they performed was fantastic. Is it going to happen the next time that they take to the field? Well, let's see how that goes.
Well, it just shows you how much a performance of a team at this level is mental.
Yeah.
Because they picked nearly the same team. I know there was a couple of changes, but the teams that get for me, I think the Dragons. Even we're talking about Queensland teams, but the Dragons will probably come out and play well next week because they've been given a touch up, and so they'll go back and work extremely hard all week. Whereas the Dolphins, with a win after that, brings confidence, but at the same time, are they going to be as motivated as they were the week before?
You'd be nervous if you were a Titans fan too. So they lost to the Dragons by 24 points in round one, and then the Dragons come out and get towed by the Dolphins by 38 points. So I think they play the Bulldogs this weekend. So hopefully...
That's not an easy game.
The Bulldogs are better this year than they have been in previous years. But still on the Dolphins, as former halves yourself, Isaiah Katoa into the team, he really had a calmness about him, the way he played.
Glad you brought that up, Adam. He just seemed to be cool, calm and collected in his play. There didn't seem to be any panic whatsoever. And, Locky and I have been in that position before, and you feel when it's following something that wasn't all that impressive, you need to be the standout player, and you're almost at a fear of failure rather than a determination to succeed. But his performance, that's as good as you'll see. That was fantastic.
Yeah, very calm. But I also think, I thought round one, while they were poor defensively, they were very predictable in attack. And I think while he brought the calmness for a young player like he is, I still think he's got that ability to be unpredictable with his play, and I think that was probably something the Dolphins needed. And yeah, no, it was a good performance from him.
Particularly when they've suffered a couple of key injuries.
Yeah.
Some bad injuries, and you know, I being honest, when I saw you know, some of the dangers of having those players with those injuries, I thought this could be a tough year for them. Then out they go.
And they've got a fitting tribute too. We did a story in 9 News Queensland on Monday night. So for the remainder of the season, they'll have a logo on their left sleeves that you'll see in games. It says TG hashtag 13, Tom Gilbert 13. What does that say for a culture of especially a new club that one of their key players is out, but they've decided to do that?
Yeah, well, obviously he's hurting. You know, that I went through one long-term injury, and that was hard. So to come back from one and get another one straight away, that's, yeah, like he's mentally tough, but like he's still going to need his teammates to help him through it. So for them to show that sort of support, it does helps Tom, but B, when he comes back into the squad, it just helps the camaraderie with him.
Yeah, wonderful support, and I had the privilege of talking to him at the training session, and he's a realist. You know, he's not looking for sympathy. He just accepted that it came along and wasn't what he had in mind, but he's just got to get on with it, and he knows. And he had full confidence. That was the point that impressed me. He had full confidence in his teammates that they were going to be able to stand up and produce it to assist the coach and all the players. And it'll be one of those challenges for the players, not ones that they wanted, but ones that they certainly will take on.
Another standout performer in that game was young Max Plath, who played lock. It was only his 4th NRL game. He was outstanding. He was probably one of the players of the match. Very fit young man. Is that opposite to his old man? You guys both would have played with Johnny Plath?
Well, Johnny, I don't know what Mac's habits are, but Johnny was Johnny was always extremely fit. Any fitness drill, he'd be up the front. He was always really strong in the gym. But then you look at what he did off the field with his eating habits and his, you know, these habits.
And how thirsty he was.
Yeah. You'd be like, how is he that fit when he take into consideration what he's digesting, not just food, drink, but these ones, you know?
Yeah. Well, the one thing...
Well, you used to do it.
In my early days, I was onto the bungers. Yes.
At half-time too? In half-time?
No, I think I only ever did that once or twice.
Yeah, okay.
Nice of you to give me up, Adam. Yeah, I did that in the early days when it was a fairly common thing for players to go in at half-time, and if they were feeling nervous or a little bit shaky, they'd light up a cigarette. And it didn't last too long for me. I used to think it's knocking me over when I'm having one of these at half-time. It ain't good at all. So that was the end of that. So
well, that's why the Winfield Cup.
Yeah, back in the days.
Handing them out like lollies.
The sponsor's product. You were just testing them out. And just finally, before we wrap it up on the Dolphins, the Hammer, first time ever in the NRL he scored a hat-trick in that win over the Dragons. Not even himself. Hammer so knew that after the match. Where does he rank in terms of, like, exciting players to watch in the NRL, one of the true attacking weapons? Because I just love seeing him out in the open.
Yeah, I think people like to go and watch athletes that have got speed, or big forwards that have got aggression. You know, I think that both those sort of people love to go to the ground and watch that. So, you know, Hammer's got speed to burn, and look, he made a couple of poor decisions in round 1, but it was his type of game the other day, and he's just good to have in the game because he becomes a bit of a cult hero.
Locky, I was glad to hear you compliment him by calling him an athlete, and that's what he appears to be. Everything about him, it's a thrill to watch him. He really does appear to be a wonderfully built, structured athlete, footballer, and he does extremely well. Have we seen the best of him? I don't think so. I think we're about to see some extraordinary displays of talent come from him. He's still got a long way to go in the game.
There was a great moment, I think it might have been his second try, chasing a kick. Sloan was next to him, the speedy fullback from the Dragons, and he almost just looked at him next to him, and they'll pace neck and neck, and he's like, well, I've got 2 more years to go. I'll just beat you to the ball. And Sloan's a very quick player as it is, so hopefully get plenty more tries from that, from the Hammer the rest of the year. And the Cowboys, I tell you what, boys, I was very nervous watching this game against the Knights. What What impressed you about their ability to come back from a very ordinary first half and get that win?
Well, like I said before, the Dolphins were ordinary round one, but they come out and turned it around because they had to. They mentally applied themselves, where the Cowboys were so good round one, a lot of people rapping them, and then they came out with a really below-par performance first half, taking nothing away from Newcastle. But I guess you've got to like the fact they fought their way back and still won the game.
Yeah.
But, I think there was a lesson to be learnt there.
Yeah, it's how they became better footballers. In the second half, they realised they had a challenge at hand, and it was something that unless they produced some of their finest form there, I think it could have been a tough year for them. Sometimes you get that snowball effect when you're not displaying your best form. It can hang around for a little while, and they needed to be a lot better and finish the game a lot better than they did start it.
And Chad Townsend, the halfback for the Cowboys, cops a bit of flack, tends to be the whipping boy occasionally, but he's been quite strong the first 2 weeks, set up the game-tying try for the Cowboys, then kicked that field goal. Do you sense even, like, he had the captaincy taken off him, co-captain in the off-season, that, in a way, might free him up a bit this year?
I think he's always been a great clutch player. Like, he's kicked a lot of field goals, even for the Cowboys, for the Sharks. Again, finding halfbacks who can get you around the park with a good kicking game, they're like, hen's teeth. So he's valuable to... And I think it's I understand why Dearden and Qlder have become the captains. They bring a work ethic and attitude, and that's not saying Chad... But, I think Tamalolo is not going to get the minutes because he's just not capable at the moment. But Chad Townsend, I don't think he's changed. He looks like he's got the same genuine intent playing than what he did when he was the captain, but he stepped up and owned that last sort of couple of minutes. Yeah,
and the maturity that he displayed when he took it upon himself to guarantee that win was something quite extraordinary. And I think that he would have sat in the dressing room, he wouldn't have done any bragging about it. He would have sat back and thought, that's the way that I've got to play the game. When I need to take hold of it, grab it by the throat, I'll do it. And that was certainly the effect that it had, and he would have impressed himself. Are we about to see better performances from him? I think so. But he's got a group around him that he often relies upon. And they're the big boys up front. If they become dominant, he then gets an opportunity to play a game that's far beyond what most people think he's quite capable of.
You guys would have loved that Tom Dearden try too, almost like a hit-up.
Yeah.
How good was that?
Well, that's what I say. For a little man, he inspires because he plays with he plays with energy, he plays with effort, and that's why he's been made a co-captain. So he will always try his hardest every week, and he's a competitor.
Oh, he sure is. He's a wonderful bloke. He's one of those guys that you often say, if I could pick a bloke in the side, if I was ever playing again, who'd be it? Well, I think Tommy would be close to being in that side. He is a performer, and sometimes it's at the most difficult period of the game. He does it quite extraordinary.
Playing alongside young blonde-headed halfbacks, that was your specialty too. Alf, Tom Dearden, you would have loved it well. And just lastly, before we wrap it up, the Cowboys, I know it's only 2 games, but do you sense they could be a genuine contender this year?
With their best performance, yes. They were so good in round one, but I would say a bit disappointed in their first 40 last week. So they just need to come every week ready to play, and they're definitely going to be a contender. Yeah,
the Cowboys, they do, Locky. They need to improve. I know I say it almost every week in our discussions, Adam, but there's a guy that's playing in a position that I've always had difficulty seeing him playing in, shifting from lock to another position up front. He's got the right to that, but I still see him as a guy that can be the prime attacking weapon for North Queensland, should he be working off the skillful ball carriers. Yeah, interested to see how many more minutes Jason Tamalolo gets this week as Todd Patton adjusts his side. The Cowboys looking for 3 in a row against the Dragons, but it all kicks off on the Wide World of Sports Thursday night, the big grand final rematch, the Broncos up against the Panthers.
This year, NRL on 9 is your one-stop shop for all footy.
That's right, Freddie. Not about the highlights, action, 7 days a week.
Billy and Gus podcast, get that on your drive on the way home. Immortal Behaviour, Grab a seat on the couch for that, and of course my favourite, Freddie in the Eight.
The best footy brains, the biggest games.
Don't trust the algorithm, subscribe to NRL on 9 and get all your entertainment there.